Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad House of Dahmer, together with my co-host Mark Ronich, a statewide news service, and jbiztechvalley.com. We have a very, very special guest with us today, Mr. John McIntyre, who is the publisher of the Spotlight newspapers. John, welcome to the Jewish View.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's so nice to have you here, fellow journalist.
Yes.
I feel really comfortable.
This is not usually our medium, though.
No, it's not.
But it's always good to have a conversation about.
People
about
say,
what
you have a radio show, Rabbi. I says, no, it's a television show. So I'm in television.
And sometimes people have come in not so dressed up as you are.
Sure.
And thinking that because they know me about, from my radio days.
Yes.
So they think it's a radio interview.
There's times, most of the time, I'm not wearing, my big boy clothes.
Well, sometimes when you're packing the papers up to be shipped, you're not wearing your
you
big
do
boy
all the
clothes.
jobs over there.
We unload trucks and
That's
we're out writing stories. Sometimes we're out in mud during football season and scholastic sports. I'm out taking pictures.
The Spotlight, of course, is a local newspaper, different than the Capital District paper. So there you get sometimes not only things sometimes, a lot of times stories that you wouldn't get. Elections or, like you say, high school football, that people are more interested more than. Hate to say it, more than the war in Afghanistan. They'd rather see, hey, how's my local high school team doing, even though obviously that's maybe a bigger story. But
unless someone in Bethlehem was killed in Afghanistan and then the Afghanistan
or they're
war.
serving in Afghanistan, or they did something very exciting while they were over.
Right.
We don't focus on any international or national or even statewide news unless there's somebody locally. So there's some tie to that local community, one of our local communities. And I mean, that is very, very important when you're talking about community journalism versus, just straight news. And if you look at all of the news that's in our papers, it's all locally sourced. It's not wire copy. It's not created anywhere but with us.
So tell us, where does the Spotlight cover? Because it's just not the town of Bethlehem. You also have other publications for other areas where you spotlight and focus on other communities.
Correct. Well, we're in Bethlehem and Guilderland, Colonie, Loudonville. Those are our main weekly areas. We do that weekly.
But you don't have a separate Guilderland edition. That's tied in with Bethlehem.
It's tied in with Bethlehem, but we cover that town.
Right.
I mean, when we cover the town of New Scotland, we cover the town of Bethlehem. We cover the town of Guilderland.
Okay.
But we have one edition that publishes all that. But we still have resources that we allocate to those areas.
Right, but you have a separate Colonie edition.
Correct.
That's only Colonie.
That is correct.
Okay, and do you have a Clifton Park? Do you go into Saratoga County at all?
We used to have a Clifton Park edition, and we used to have a Schenectady County edition. We have since decided to pull back on that.
Is there a reason for that?
Well, I think it really comes down to economics. When you're talking about just to distribute your newspaper in Saratoga and Schenectady counties, probably cost us between $4,000 and $5,000 a week, and that doesn't include to print it is probably another $3,000 or $5,000 a week. By the time you get all that through, there was not enough businesses to support it through advertising, and at that point it was also those were free circulation papers, versus in Delmar, Colonie, and Loudon, they're $1, and the subscriptions are $30 a year. Right. Which basically basically covers the postage.
Let me ask something, because that's a big issue nowadays. I mean, you read the New York Times is losing millions of dollars. I mean, that's the biggest and best.
Sure.
And so the newspaper industry is really on hard times. I mean, are you surviving or thriving even? Maybe a local paper.
But I will tell you that there are certain portions of the news industry that are having trouble, but there are other parts that are thriving. I'm not going to tell you that we are thriving. All right, we are a very small organization, and the owners do the work as well as the worker bees.
Yeah.
So it really comes down to what your focus is. There is no one that is doing what we're doing. So when you get into the larger daily newspapers, the larger national papers and things like that, there are other people that are doing that news. But no one's sending a reporter to the Bethlehem Town Board or the Planning Board. Nobody's covering that.
You hear on, let's say, Channel 13 are partners with the Post-Star up in Glens Falls, and you hear other newspapers partnering or media outlets partnering.
Sure.
Do you partner with anyone else? Is there someone who says, "Oh, we weren't at partners at the Spotlight newspapers tell us that at the Bethlehem Town Board meeting it was such and such.
We don't partner with anybody on the local level for that. We don't do that. The only thing that we do, however, is that with the Times Union, we aggregate each other's news online. So they will run links to all of our Bethlehem stories on spotlightnews.com, on Times Union, the Our Town pages of the Times Union, and vice versa. We run our state news, the state news section of our websites. They are the Times Union. We run the Times Union.
And is it a free exchange?
Yes.
So
Yes.
it's just being cooperative, friendly, neighborly, all that.
Well, we decided that, and this was a number of years ago. The new publisher of the Times Union at the time called me and said, we should meet, and we should talk about how we can do things together, rather than trying to divide.
Is that George Hurst?
No, it was before
him?
George. It was Mark Aldham.
Okay.
And George has carried on that thing. But there was for a long time there was always an adversarial, competitive edge. Well, in the newspaper industry and in media in general, there's not enough of it to go around. You don't need enemies. You need friends. And there's plenty of news for all of us, and there's not enough news people to cover it all. So if you choose what you do well, and you share that, it makes a lot of sense.
What's your reporting staff for Guilderland, New Scotland, Bethlehem side?
I have 2 full-time reporters, a full-time sports editor, and then I have 2 editors that work through all this stuff. They do, again, they're out taking pictures or they're writing stories.
Right, but their title is functionally an editor, so they don't really do the writing comes to them, and then they pare it down to make it fit into the paper.
In theory.
Okay.
But then at Spotlight, everyone does a little bit of everything. I mean, that's the one great thing about working for a very small newspaper, is that you get to do everything. When we were over on Adams Street, once a month a truck would show up with 31,000 of our monthly products that we do with parent pages and senior Spotlight. The whole staff would come outside and we'd unload the truck by hand. And it's a team building
thing. So the
thing.
receptionists do that also?
They will do, like, for example, the reception areas, they're all in my front end call center.
Yeah.
When people call in, they help them with whatever it is. They write, they help people write the obituaries and the announcements and things like that. They help with that, as well as the classified advertising. But sort of, I answer the phone.
Sure you do.
I talk to people. I talk to people about all sorts of things.
I've called and you've answered, and I'm like, wait a minute. The publisher's answering? Wait a minute. Yeah. It's like the teacher. It's like
one
answering.
difference between a local paper and because Mark and I have many assemblymen and senators, state senators on our show, and one of the things they confidentally actually told me, it wasn't so confidential, but these reporters are so, they're almost like dogs, they're bloodhounds. They're they're just not saying, okay, what are you guys doing?
Present company accepted.
Yeah, I know, Mark. It is true. They did say that. Mark wasn't that way. And but Spotlight, you don't see them, let's dig up some, you say schmutz in Yiddish, but some dirt on the town supervisor.
No.
Let's really rake them through the coals. You don't see that.
That's our goal. Is not. I mean, I think that the news media in general, has been stereotyped. We're not. They've worked that stereotype, and they've lived it. However, I think that there's one of the things about community newspapers is that we talk about good news and we talk about bad news.
Right.
But one of the most important functions of a community newspaper is to make sure that you hold people accountable. You hold your public officials accountable. If there's something that's said that's not correct, then somebody needs to check that out. And we're not afraid to do that. We will foil things. We will go after. We will do investigative work. We will do that. However, it's not our primary goal. Our primary goal is to disseminate information on a very, very basic and local level and get that information out to the community. Because if we weren't here, I really don't know who would be doing it.
And how long have you been in this area doing with the paper?
I've been with Spotlight, I think it's 16 years. It's coming 17 very quickly.
As the publisher?
Well, I was the general manager, and then I was a vice president, chief operating officer,
under whose
publisher.
tutelage?
Well, I had, when I first came in, my publisher was in Syracuse, because we also, Community Media Group, which owns Spotlight, which I am an owner, I'm also now an owner. So that's been the thing. I started with this newspaper as a, not with the Spotlight, but with the group itself, with the company, as a sports editor. Back when I got out of journalism school, I went to Syracuse, and so I was a true journalist. And I was a sports editor, and I worked my way up through that. I went away from the industry for about 5 or 6 years, and went to a printing company, and then I came back as on the dark side, as they say. I went in management. So I was a general manager because I could do everything but really sell ads.
Right.
Well, now I have to know how to sell ads, and I have to know math. I never thought I'd have to know math, but as a publisher, you have to have some math.
Right.
So so it's been a very long career.
Well, and you're how old now?
I am 46.
Okay, so you're not that old to have a long career.
No, but I've been working in the newspaper industry since I was 15 years old.
Wow.
So when I was writing for my high school daily newspaper back when I was 15.
Yeah. Well, I started when I was 17 in the business.
See?
So there you go.
So it's something that you can't. It's in your blood.
It's in your blood. Right.
And you can't get it out.
And that's it. Every time I've noticed that when I first started, I was always calling everyone by their official title.
Yes.
Now, as I'm getting older, I'm calling everyone by their first name because they're younger than me. And they were always older than me before, and I always wanted to show due respect. Now I have they're tarnished a little bit, and I call everyone by their first name. And sometimes I don't believe that I'm actually doing that, but,
That happens, and, it also depends on where I'm at.
Yeah.
And what place I'm in and what conversation I'm having. I think that I always try to give respect to whoever I'm interviewing in whatever context it is. If I'm in a public place, I use formal titles and everywhere. But when they're calling me up, yelling at me because I made a mistake, or one of my reporters made a mistake, or they feel that I made a mistake and I just didn't see it their way.
Right.
The one thing I will say is that I enjoy those conversations, even if it's a mistake on my part,
Right.
even if it's a problem or people are upset. Because when people are upset, I want to talk to them because that means that they have passion, and it's important to them. And if it's important to them, then the best thing that I can do is to give them the
So
time.
you tell them to write a letter to the editor so you can publish
do.
it. I'm saying, hey, if you feel that way, why don't you just write and we can get a story out of it.
And we do that, and there are times where we will run clarifications, and we will, I have run corrections,
Right.
and I've run retractions on things if we were truly wrong. However, we double check everything. That's why you have editors,
Right.
and that's why you run things
So
to
you're not the editorial page. That's not your job.
We have
publisher.
I have an editorial board. Then we talk about what we're going to write for the newspaper's opinion every week, and those can get very contentious sometimes.
Because everybody has a different opinion.
Sometimes everybody does.
So how many people do you have just for the Colonie paper?
For the Colonie paper, I share editors, so part of those things.
Okay.
But then I have 2 people that predominantly work on
Covering the town board and
town
other...
board. Well, in the town board, I have one guy who basically goes in the town board and handles the town beat.
Right.
And same with Bethlehem. Marcy Velt here, she does predominantly everything Bethlehem. John Purcell covers the county because the county is applicable for both Colonie and Delmar, Guilderland, New Scotland, and he also covers Voorheesville, New Scotland, and Guilderland. So he covers those boards and it really depends on what the schedule is.
So you basically only have one person covering Colonie, or you have 2 people covering Colonie?
I have one full-time person,
one
and then my sports editor is part-time. He goes back and forth.
Okay.
I mean, he's a full-time guy,
Right.
but he's got to cover that. Now, the other thing with sports, these teams all play one another.
Right, sure.
So
And 2 for 1.
That's
all
right. We call them twofers.
Yeah.
And he always laughs at me. And I said, well, I'm going to, and I shoot pictures
Right.
for sports, especially in the fall and in the wintertime when he can't. And my son comes with me and he shoots. So we always try to find the twofer of the week. What's the twofer this week?
Yeah.
Where is it?
That's great.
So
Keep it all in the family.
and I have told him that I don't expect him to be in the newspaper industry. I don't necessarily want him to be in the newspaper industry. If he wants to, but he can be exposed to all these things.
How has the online portion affected your bottom line? Has it helped financially?
I don't know that it's helped. I don't know that it's hurt. I think that if you look at the decline, that you see in newspapers and where you have, it really wasn't a decline based on people switching to internet or people switching to other mediums. We just went through the greatest recession.
Right.
They call it the Great Recession for that reason. And I think that if you look at the people who are advertisers, because that's where a majority of our income comes from, is advertising. If you look at that whole subset, that took a huge hit.
Mm-hmm.
It took a huge hit in that time. And we had about 10% of our little, small, and local, we have micro businesses and small and mid-sized businesses. That's really who we have. We don't have the big, giant corporations like Coca-Cola.
Got Owens Corning. Selkirk.
It used to be GE. Now it's Sabic.
Okay.
But yes. But what do they run? They don't advertise their widgets. They don't advertise that. That is not really advertising. That's community service.
Okay.
They sponsor the community calendar every week.
Okay.
And for Sabic, they're showing that they're community oriented business by making sure that all of those, they sponsor that whole page. And by sponsoring that, we know that we're going to be able to get in more community shorts and more community events. So that's a difference. There's a difference in the kind of advertising that it is. Whereas when you go to see Joe Falvo at Falvo's Meat in Voorheesville, he's going to advertise hamburger steaks and whatever else he has on that particular day.
Do you get Price Chopper to
We do.
advertise?
Matter of fact, when they just opened their new store in Latham, they were buying
for only your colonies.
They bought. That's where it was appropriate.
But they weren't trying to advertise in the Bethlehem paper that they could get people to go out to Colony.
Correct.
Do they ever do kosher advertising?
They do not do kosher advertising, even though if you look at our demographic and you look at my readership, it's about 35% Jewish.
Right.
So, and we talk to them about that, but those are things, they have to make.
And the ShopRite was trying to compete with Price Chopper, and I noticed that, and Rabbi Simon pointed this out to me when ShopRite first opened, was that they had, I think, 13 refrigerated cabinets of kosher food.
They try to get to kosher market.
Now they're down to 3, and now they have fewer choices of frozen foods. And they just weren't, they weren't advertising, they weren't telling people about it, they weren't even sending out like emails, and they weren't doing the job to get people away from Price Chopper to go to ShopRite. Now, that's a local story, I would think. So, have you?
We haven't looked at that.
No. Okay.
I can tell you that we haven't looked at that. And, part of you have to really have a conversation with the people, the owners of the stores.
Yes.
And that's one of the reasons why we're in very small businesses and mid-sized businesses and regional businesses.
And not large.
And not large. Because I don't have somebody that's going to drive to New Jersey in ShopRite or if it's Hannaford, to drive to Maine to really talk with
those
people.
Over the phone.
Well, you can do it over the phone, but if you truly want to have a relationship, they may not want to take the time to do that. They can meet with an advertising agency and buy this whole market with one phone call to an advertising agency who then makes the decisions for them. You don't have, those relationships are not the tight relationship that you have with the community papers.
I used to work with Water Technology magazine, and they were specific, like you're specific for Bethlehem and Guilderland and towns of New Scotland and then Colonie, but we were specific for just how the quality of water was impacted by anything, and who in the industry was being appointed and president of this association or that association, and we focused on that. So when the World Trade Center collapsed, it didn't matter that it was a terrorist attack. The towers collapsed, and how did that impact the water quality of Lower Manhattan? Oh, and by the way, at the very end, it was, by the way, there was a terrorist attack at the very end, because that wasn't their audience. So your audience, couldn't you sort of explain, how do you explain to these advertisers that this is your lifeblood, that you need to have their advertising dollar, and make it, even if you make it a community service, do something like you do with the folks
It
down
depends.
in Selkirk.
Really, one of the most important things that you can do with an advertiser is really talk to them about who they're trying to reach. You have to, you have to match yourself. If you look at who reads our papers, it's people in that particular geographic area, and they're in Bethlehem, New Scotland, Guilderland, and the town of Colonie. If they're trying to reach those people, I can make the case that we're the right person to do. We're the lowest common denominator for news and for audience.
Right.
Because you're not going to spend money to advertise in places that you're not going to draw people from.
Right.
Especially a pizza place, or a food place, or a service at doctors or other things. You draw from that particular area. But it's all about that relationship that you have with them. And that's where it comes down to.
So so you have to build a relationship. So maybe you take them out to lunch, you get to know them. That takes a lot of time, and it's an effort. Yeah.
And it takes years.
It takes
years, but it also you have to take the time. All of my people are out in the community.
Right.
They volunteer for different organizations. They do a lot of things. I mean, I was chairman of the Bethlehem Chamber of Commerce for a number of years, and I've been involved in the chamber for 16 years. Those things, those relationships that you build there, help spill over.
Absolutely. Yeah, it shows credibility. It shows that, also that you're a pillar of the community. You're concerned about the community as much as you're not a wacko who's trying to put out a publication that's going to destroy everything.
No, no, we're not really interested in that.
Right.
When things go wrong, we will say that they go wrong.
How did you cover the Porco trial, given that it was in Orange County, it was not local?
I put a reporter at the trial.
You did?
I did.
And did you have to hire someone locally to replace that reporter, or?
No, we all covered this stuff. He was down there 3 days, the 3 or 4 days that the trial took place during the week.
Yeah.
And we put him up in a hotel. And
so I was going to ask you, is that probably your biggest story, or what would be in 15, 16 years?
That's one of the largest ones. That's one of the ones where we went national, with people were looking to us because we were actually putting up photos, and this was at the sort of the beginning. 2006 was a time when the internet was just getting really going for news. It was becoming more mainstream. And we were posting stories within 2 hours of court ending. We were posting pictures up as soon as we got them.
Did you get, because of relationships you might have had with the police, did you have any exclusive photos that the police might have taken at the crime scene that they slipped or
No.
they gave you?
No. However, we had a lot of information that we could not print.
Oh, yeah?
We had tons and tons and
Can you
tons
tell
of
us now?
information. No. But there are,
because it would be concerning the trial, would prejudice to trial, you're saying?
not only prejudice to trial, but there are certain ethics and values, that journalistic ethics that you have. If I cannot, absolutely confirm that this information is true through two sources, I'm not going to run that, unless it's. I don't even know if there's any examples that I've gone against that, because that's what can get you in trouble, and it's also not right. You can't unprint the page and unpull it back. You can't unring the bell.
But that's where the online stuff really helps with the website, because you can always either, I don't know, some people just change it and other people just put the liner through it. And
no, we change it, or we will run a note at the bottom.
Update.
We'll run an update and actually change what is wrong.
Yeah.
In print, we'll run it the next week. The immediate next issue, we'll run it. But there's a lot of things. It's amazing to me how many people say, well, I told you about this story last week and you didn't run. You decided to ignore it. Well, no, it's not that we didn't ignore it. We went and checked it out, and it didn't check out the way that it really that we thought it was. And I think the most important thing is that you do have to do your due diligence. You have to go through that.
When I was in taking journalism classes, and we talked about the newspaper industry in the 1700s. It was those publishers and those editors that were really the pillar of the community. Everyone looked to them for their editorial. Their opinions could change an election, could change public opinion on a dime. And do you find that still true when you write something that you really could have that impact locally?
Well, one of the things when I look at take political endorsements, we do not endorse candidates.
Right.
And we don't endorse candidates because these communities are so small. What I think about a particular candidate or another candidate is not really as important as me using that space to say, this candidate believes this and this candidate believes this. Here's the platforms. Now you have the information to go decide. And I think that that's important, especially in the muckraking days, in the early 20th century.
Well, 20th century.
You had some people who really took that power, and I think that damaged the reputations of a lot of
but if you look
newspapers.
at Thomas Paine and Common Sense, and you look at other, in the 1700s, they weren't muckrakers.
No.
But they were still someone who was very, institutionalized within the community. I mean, they really could run for office themselves because everyone looked to them as their sage advice. For the.
I would love to be held to that
high regard.
To that high regard. Although my goal is to get it right, and also, I don't have a dog in most of these fights.
The biggest compliment that I ever got from someone was when they said, I didn't agree with what you wrote or what you said on the radio, but the fact that you were fair about it, that was
fairness.
The best that we could get.
That is probably what I teach, and a lot of the people who come to work for me are young.
All right, so we just have 1 minute left, but we want to say, it goes beyond something you touched upon. What you're talking about now is just that I just love this country and the freedom of the press. Not just what's my neighbor doing and who won the quarterback and who won the football game. But you're doing an incredible job because you keep everybody's feet on the fire, and I think that's what our country's made out of over here, to keep everybody a little bit honest, and that's the, freedom of the press. So I want to thank you. Here's a picture of the Spotlight. Anybody who's interested should obviously go to Spotlight and find out what your locals are doing. And thank you, John McIntyre, for being on.
Thank you for having me today. It's great.